Chapter 2, A Foundation That Doesn't Exist. Sweetie lifted her chin, let the black bow settle at the back of her head, and stepped toward the open door, already thinking of secret foundations, red pools, and the first lie she was about to tell the entire world. The corridor beyond the preparation chamber was narrower than the rooms behind it and far more dangerous. Not because anyone had armed it. Because it had purpose. The floor was a dark reflective stone that caught the white overhead lights in long sharp bands, making every step look cleaner than it felt. The walls were paneled in matte silver with thin vertical seams where hidden doors and security partitions sat flush enough to disappear. Ahead, the passage curved slightly toward a pair of immense doors of black metal and pale glass. Beyond them waited the fated hall. The session official walked half a pace ahead with his cue tablet angled toward his chest like a shield. The two ceremonial escorts moved with measured slowness meant to imply dignity rather than caution. Sweetie followed between them, small and black-clad, hands loose at her sides, while the muted sounds from the hall grew clearer with every step. Voices first. Then the layered hush of a huge room trying to behave. Then camera rotors, soft and high and almost insect-like. A final threshold opened as they approached, silent and immediate. Cold air brushed across Sweetie's face. Then the hall revealed itself. It was built to make nations feel observed by history. The ceiling rose in a vast pale arc crossed by luminous bands that resembled orbital tracks drawn in light. Those bands converged over the center of the chamber, not quite meeting, leaving a circular open space above the speaking floor like an eye that had chosen not to blink. Rows of seating radiated outward in a precise crescent, each section marked by national insignia, defensive alliance crests, and data panels folded elegantly into the architecture. The floor itself was a dark polished surface that mirrored movement in blurred reflections, so that every official crossing it seemed trailed by a thinner ghost. The fated seats occupied the inner curve. They were not identical. That would have suggested equality of weight, and the world was rarely polite enough to lie that hard. Some were broader, some slightly elevated, some marked by more visible integration ports or armrest consoles depending on the authority attached to the office. Sweetie's seat stood near the heart of the crescent where the architecture subtly favored it. Not an overt throne. Something worse. A chair designed by people who knew power could be made far more intimidating by pretending it had not been decorated for that purpose. Behind the inner seats rose layers of delegate galleries, advisor tiers, and media positions. Above those, enclosed observation balconies curved around the hall's upper walls in shadowed strips of dark glass. Camera drones hovered in restrained patterns, each one no larger than a helmet, their lenses adjusting with tiny glints of blue-white light. Further out, monumental banners hung between the vertical light columns, national colors, defense coalitions, the planetary emblem, and the 12-raid mark of the fated program itself. It was bright without warmth. Ceremonial without softness. Every line in the place said the same thing in 100 expensive ways: this is where the world argues while pretending it has already agreed. Sweetie stepped forward. The sound of her shoes on the floor was clear enough to matter. The announcement of her entrance had already started. She could hear it from the chamber's concealed speakers, her name and office title carried in a measured voice to every level of the hall. At the outer edges of the room, delegates turned in neat staggered waves as attention shifted. Screens along the lower galleries updated with her image and abbreviated profile. The live feed likely carried the same shot now: newly appointed representative, platinum hair, crimson eyes, black formal coat, black bow, too young, too small, too central to ignore. Good. Let them all have to look. She felt the scrutiny arrive in layers. The first was public. Broad, faceless, heavy simply from volume. The second was institutional: analysts, aides, military staff, legal observers, information teams. People already searching posture, expression, composure, trying to work out whether the planetary intelligence had made a move or a mistake. The third was personal. The other fated. They were seated already along the inner arc, each one turned to watch her approach with the kind of stillness that only really dangerous people managed in public. Sweetie let her eyes move just enough to take them in while she walked. To her left, a woman in deep navy military formal wear rested one elbow on her chair's arm as though all this belonged to her patients more than anyone's law. Mid-30s, dark hair cut short at the jaw, a face sharpened by long acquaintance with bad news and expensive choices. Her expression held no open contempt. That made it worse. She watched Sweetie the way a veteran surgeon might watch a child volunteer for a difficult operation with a kitchen knife. Analytical, Sweetie thought. That one would not underestimate forever, only at first. 2 seats farther sat a man with silver threaded through black hair and the immaculate posture of someone who had been raised by doctrine before his parents had finished with him. His uniform was diplomatic rather than military, pale grey lined with bronze at the shoulders, the insignia on his collar more ornate than practical. He did not bother hiding his skepticism. It sat right on his face in elegant daylight. When Sweetie's gaze touched his, one brow lifted the smallest amount. Not insult. Assessment flavored with disappointment. Interesting. He had likely hoped for someone older. Or larger. Or born to the right names. Something along those lines. To the right side of the arc, a broader man with a scar disappearing into his collar leaned toward the woman seated beside him and murmured something just low enough to be technically private. Sweetie did not catch every word over the chamber acoustics, but she caught enough. Looks 12. The woman beside him, older, skin marked by the pale geometric lines of some neural interface along one temple, answered without moving her mouth much. Then perhaps don't lose an argument to her in the first 10 minutes. That almost made Sweetie smile. Further down, one fated did not bother to look at her at all. He remained focused on the data pane built into his armrest, posture composed, chin slightly lowered, performing indifference with the kind of care that meant he felt the exact opposite. And there, near the outer left, a woman in dark green with a precise braid over one shoulder, fingers interlaced in her lap, face unreadable until Sweetie got just close enough to see the eyes. Not hostile. Not skeptical. Worried. For the office, perhaps. For the world's reaction. For what it meant when the great machine chose someone who looked like this. Sweetie filed them all away. The camera drones shifted. One descended by a meter to catch her crossing the inner floor. Another adjusted toward the fated arc to frame reactions. Someone in media control knew exactly what they were doing: contrast, tension, symbolism. They wanted the image of the small new representative walking into a semicircle of seasoned figures whose approval she had not yet earned. She gave them a good one. Her pace remained even. Not hurried, not hesitant. The coat moved cleanly around her legs. Her hair, left mostly down, caught the light in pale metallic strands against the black of her clothing. The bow remained a dark, clean shape at the back of her head, simple and impossible to mistake. Her expression was mild, almost lazily composed, the kind of face that could be read as calm by optimists and dangerous by smarter people. The speaking floor opened before her like a polished pool. At its center stood the presentation line and microphone stand, currently dark. Beyond it, 3 shallow steps rose to the inner crescent where the fated seats waited. The central chair, hers now, seemed larger the closer she came, not from size but from placement. It had room around it. Breathing room. Space the architecture had deliberately withheld from the others. She mounted the steps. The hall's sound changed. Lower here. More intimate. The delegate galleries became a wall of attention rather than a crowd. A session attendant guided her with a slight gesture toward the seat. Sweetie stopped beside it for the half-second protocol required while the formal introduction completed over the speakers. Appointed under planetary authority to the vacant major seat of national strategic guardianship. The title sequence rolled on in expensive syllables. She noticed the man in pale grey watching her hands, likely checking for nerves. The woman in navy was watching her eyes instead. Better instinct. Sweetie turned and sat. The chair adjusted under her at once, almost imperceptibly lowering and tightening its support angles to her frame. its interface surface lit along the edges in a subdued white that matched the hall's central lighting scheme. A translucent data strip appeared near her right hand and politely offered authentication access, live session feed, current speaking order, chamber protocol, and crisis override channels she absolutely did not have time to explore right now. The hall changed, not physically. Socially. A seat fills and the world immediately begins recalculating where emptiness used to be. The central chair no longer looked like a vacancy. It looked like an occupied position, and that forced everyone present to rearrange themselves around the fact of her. The skeptical man in grey straightened a fraction. The scarred man stopped leaning. Somewhere in the delegate galleries, a run of quiet conversation died off all at once. Interesting. Sweetie rested one elbow lightly on the chair arm and let her gaze travel across the chamber as if she had every right to take inventory. Because now she did. The data strip at her hand bloomed again with names keyed to seat positions. Helpful. Director Havren. That would be the woman in Navy. Global Defense Council veteran, high authority in orbital response coordination. Her file marker was layered with enough sealed tabs to imply a career built on surviving disasters other people only read about later. Minister Serik Vol. The man in pale grey. Diplomatic heavyweight from a defense-rich allied state, long track record in intergovernmental resource negotiations, public advocate for stability of symbolic offices, which sounded suspiciously like a polite way to say he hated surprises. Marshal Terran Evos. The scarred man. Direct military background, border conflict specialist, famous for operational brutality presented in calm language. Charming. The woman in green was Representative Lisa Wren, Cultural and Civilian Mobilization Authority from a coastal federation that had borne ugly Aki losses in the past. Her public sentiment metrics were absurdly high. That explained the worried eyes. Someone like that lived and died by how the public metabolized symbolism. And the one pretending not to care at all. Representative Oren Pell. Economic war structuring, predictive logistics, and strategic reserve doctrine. If he kept ignoring her any harder he might achieve orbit. Good. There was no shortage of personalities in need of improvement, the formal introduction concluded. A measured wash of applause moved through the hall. Polite. Controlled. More acknowledgement than welcome. It rolled across the delegate levels and faded quickly, never quite reaching warmth. Sweetie lifted her chin the slightest amount in response. To her right, Minister Vol leaned just enough to speak without technically breaking decorum. You wear this better than I expected. His voice was smooth, cultured, and faintly unpleasant in the way good metal instruments were unpleasant when used for surgery. Sweetie turned her head. Thank you, she said. I assume you mean the office and not the color palette. Havren, on Vol's far side, made no sound at all, but one corner of her mouth nearly moved. Vol looked at Sweetie for a beat, recalibrating. I mean visibility. That too. He folded one hand over the other. You understand, everyone here is now obliged to wonder what the AI saw. Sweetie let her eyes drift briefly to the delegate tiers, then back to him. If they're efficient, they'll wonder what it saw that made them none of the available alternatives. That earned a stillness. Tiny. Local. Real. Vol's expression remained composed, but his gaze sharpened by a degree that finally made him look worth talking to. You are either unusually calm, he said, or very well trained. Sweetie smiled faintly. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Before he could answer, the scarred marshal across the arc spoke in a voice meant to travel just far enough. Let's hope the first speech tells us which. Lisa Wren shot him a glance that should have skinned paint. Must you start already? I'm showing confidence, Evos said. In what? In her ability to survive a sentence. That time Sweetie did smile. She looked across at him, all pale hair and red eyes and small dark lines of formal dress, and said, I appreciate the optimism. It's nice to know someone here came prepared to be disappointed by me and chose hope instead. A few of the nearby delegates heard it. One of them made a visible effort not to react on camera and nearly failed. Marshal Evos barked a short laugh. Genuine. Good, he said. At least you speak. Representative Pell, still apparently married to his armrest display, said without looking up, in some offices, that is considered a risk factor. Sweetie glanced at him. Then you must live dangerously every day. Pell finally looked at her. That was better. His eyes were pale, cool, and much more awake than his performative indifference suggested. Only in budget season. The line was dry enough to count as humor in this room. It passed between the seats like a small current. Some tension bled off, not gone, not even close, but altered. Sweetie could feel the recalculation in real time. She was no longer just the AI's baffling choice. She was now the baffling choice who could answer without freezing. That brought a kind of temporary respect. Not trust. Trust was slower and far more annoying. Above the inner arc, the chamber lights shifted subtly, the central bands brightened, signaling the approach of the next formal stage. Across the hall, lower-level staff settled. Drones adjusted into speaking positions. The session moderator stood from their station at the base of the central floor and moved toward the presentation line. Sweetie's chair display updated. Speaking order, current appointee introduction. Window open in 041. 41 seconds. Her pulse remained level. Not because she was fearless. Because fear was currently competing with several more interesting emotions and losing badly. The system prompt still existed at the edge of her vision, quiet and patient, waiting with the kind of calm only impossible things ever seem to have. First seed available upon public introduction. She did not look at it. Not outwardly. Havren leaned back in her seat by the smallest amount and spoke without turning her head. When they challenge you, do not answer the performance. Answer the motive behind it. Sweetie glanced at her. The older woman's eyes remained on the moderator crossing the floor. Some here will test whether you break. Some will test whether you can be guided. A few will already be wondering whether the intelligence selected you because you are useful, or because you are the beginning of a correction. Interesting advice to give in full public seating. Interesting woman. Which do you think? Sweetie asked. Now Havren looked at her. Her face had the weathered severity of someone who had long ago stopped wasting softness on rooms like this, but her eyes were startlingly clear. Not warm. Clear. I think, she said, that an empty major seat for this long meant the answer available was not acceptable until now. Then she looked forward again. That was either reassurance or a warning. Possibly both. Sweetie let it sit where it landed. The moderator reached the presentation line. The hall quieted in visible stages, delegate galleries first, then advisor tiers, then the media rows and their murmuring technical staff. It all folded down into a chamber-wide hush broad enough to feel structural. Lights narrowed fractionally toward the center. The microphones awoke with a thin ring of white status light. Sweetie's data strip flashed once. Proceed. The moderator lifted their head. Representatives, delegates, and citizens in live attendance across all synchronized networks. The words carried perfectly. This session now recognizes the newly appointed fated representative of the major strategic seat. Every eye in the hall fixed inward. The moderator turned towards Sweetie and extended one open hand toward the speaking floor. Representative Sweetie, they said, the chamber recognizes your first address. Sweetie rose from the central chair. The movement itself changed the room. Not in any mystical sense. In a political one, which was usually worse. A seated figure could still be interpreted as an abstraction, an appointment, a statistic, a controversy under lighting. The moment she stood, she became immediate. Proportions, posture, voice not yet spoken but already anticipated. Every doubt in the chamber gathered itself and looked up. She stepped down from the inner crescent toward the speaking floor. The polished black surface reflected her in a long dark blur beneath the white chamber lights. Camera drones adjusted with coordinated shifts, their lenses narrowing as she crossed into the center line. Somewhere beyond the visible delegates, Production teams were deciding which angle best preserved gravity without making her look too small. Somewhere else, commentators were lowering their voices and pretending they had already anticipated whatever she was about to say. The microphone waited where the moderator had left it, a slim standing unit mounted on a circular base inset into the floor. No podium. No shield. Nothing to hide behind. Just her, the chamber, and every consequence that came with being heard. Good, she thought. Better this way. She stopped at the line. The floor marker lit softly beneath her shoes, recognizing position and activating speaker priority. A translucent prompt flashed at the edge of her vision: official remarks available, speech assist standing by, national affirmation sequence queued. The system provided graceful ways to obey. Sweetie ignored all of them. Not entirely. She had memorized the prepared remarks already in the preparation chamber because she'd had no reason not to. They were competent. Cautious. Full of phrases designed to reassure older people with influence and younger people with screens. The kind of speech no one remembered word for word but everyone described afterward as appropriate. Appropriate was useful. First, she needed them comfortable. She lifted her gaze. From the speaking line, the fated hall looked even more aggressively intentional than it had from her seat. The inner crescent framed her from behind. The delegate tiers spread upward in ordered rows of light and fabric and controlled faces. The observation balconies were black glass bands suspended in the upper arc like unblinking eyelids. National insignia glowed in clean colors from embedded panels. The 12-rayed fated emblem shone above the far wall, pale and cold and very sure of its right to witness. Somewhere in the live audience were people who had already dismissed her. Somewhere else were those leaning forward now, waiting for the first obvious crack. Let them wait. Sweetie placed one hand lightly against the side of the microphone stem, not gripping, not fidgeting, just claiming the object as hers for the duration. When she spoke, her voice carried cleanly. Honored representatives. Delegates. Citizens watching across the network. No tremor. No hesitation. The chamber stayed very still. I accept this office with full awareness that I was not the answer many of you expected. That landed exactly the way she wanted it to. Not dramatic. Not defensive. Acknowledgement first, before critics could pretend she needed the situation explained to her. A ripple moved through the lower delegate rows, not sound, just attention sharpening. Sweetie continued. The seat I have been given was left empty for too long to be ceremonial. It represents obligation on a scale too large for comfort, and a world that does not have the luxury of confusing symbolism with safety. There. A little life. Enough to keep it from sounding like it had been engineered in a room full of consultants who feared verbs. She let a breath pass before the next line, not for nerves, but for rhythm. I am young. That is obvious. My background is ordinary by the standards of this chamber. That is also obvious. The planetary intelligence was aware of both facts before it selected me. I will not insult this office by pretending those realities do not exist, and I will not insult the intelligence by assuming it overlooked them. Better. In the inner crescent, Minister Vull's expression changed by a degree so small most people would have missed it. His skepticism had not lessened. It had merely become more attentive. Harvran sat motionless, eyes on Sweetie, unreadable. Marshal Evos had leaned back slightly, one hand over his mouth in the posture of a man prepared to be entertained against his will. Sweetie went on. Our world has spent 7 centuries living in the aftermath of an invasion that half of humanity remembers too clearly and the other half has grown used to stepping around. We have orbital rings, defense treaties, preserved impact fields, strategic doctrines, memorial days, and enough evidence in metal and bone to fill generations of classrooms. In the upper tiers, some faces tightened. Good. The Aki always mattered. Even among the complacent, the wordless shape of old fear still sat behind the ribs. We also have routine, she said. And routine is comfortable. It teaches people how to survive history by arranging furniture around it. A small pause. That is understandable. It is not sufficient. That one held. The room did not move, but Sweetie felt the attention shift from skeptical curiosity toward engaged listening. Not approval. She wasn't greedy. Listening was enough. She kept her tone level, clinical where it needed to be and only slightly sharpened by her own presence. The office I now hold was not created to reassure people that the world is stable. It exists because the world is not stable, because preparation cannot depend on mood, and because the cost of delay is always collected from someone less powerful than the people who argued for it. There was a flicker in the delegate galleries at that. Not outrage, exactly. More like professional discomfort. Some of them were the people who argued for delay. Some worked for them. Sweetie was not speaking wildly. That was the trick. She was speaking just inside the limits of respectability, which made the edges cut better. I do not stand here to ask for patience while I grow into the role, she said. The role does not have that kind of time. I stand here to tell you that I understand what this office is for. Now she let a touch of warmth into the next line, not softness, not gratitude, just a deliberate human note laid over steel. It is for choosing readiness over vanity. Duty over convenience. Coordination over pride. And when necessary, truth over comfort. At the side of the chamber, Director Anne Veron stood among transition officials and support staff, hands folded before her. She had been holding herself like a taut wire since Sweetie took the floor. At that last line, some of the tension in her shoulders eased. The speech was working. Not because it was brilliant. Because it was precise. Sweetie shifted her weight almost imperceptibly and continued into the section everyone expected: unity, resource cooperation, anti-Aki mission continuity. The prepared remarks gave her all the proper bones. She simply made them sound as though a living mind had chosen to use them. Our nation's commitments will remain firm, she said. Our defensive contributions will not diminish. Our coordination with allied states will continue where it strengthens the whole rather than flattering the language of unity while hollowing out its practice. A few heads rose at that. There were politics packed into the sentence like blades in velvet. Enough that experts would spend the next 6 hours arguing whether she had signaled a coming resource dispute or merely warned against symbolic coalition theater. Sweetie did not care which interpretation won. The point was that they now had to consider the possibility that she was speaking on purpose. She let her gaze travel once over the chamber, not lingering anywhere long enough to become a challenge. To those who have served in this assembly longer than I have existed, I offer neither imitation nor apology. Experience matters. So does perspective not yet worn smooth by repetition. If I earn the respect of this chamber, I would rather do it by function than by resemblance. There. Let them chew on that. Representative Lisa Wren, in green, lowered her eyes for a moment as if hiding something dangerously close to approval. Voul's fingers tapped once against his sleeve and stopped. Pell, who had cultivated indifference like a greenhouse crop, was now openly watching. The live feed would be doing the rest. Millions of viewers, maybe more, hearing the small strange new representative say exactly what proper speeches were not supposed to say while remaining too disciplined to punish for it. Sweetie reached the closing section. The Aki do not become less real because ordinary life continues, she said. They do not become less dangerous because market indexes rise, festivals proceed on schedule, or comfortable societies learn to confuse delay with peace. The chamber light seemed harsher for a second, though that might have been only the white ring around the microphone brightening as the system balanced her voice. We are defended today by the work of people who prepared when preparation was unpopular. We will be defended tomorrow, if we are defended at all, by our willingness to continue that work before fear becomes fashionable again. That was as close to a real conviction as she intended to offer them for free. She let the next silence breathe just long enough. Then she delivered the formal close. I accept this office. I accept its burden. And I will meet the responsibilities attached to it without confusing difficulty for excuse. Her final line came clean and simple. Thank you. She stepped back half a pace. The microphone light dimmed slightly, signaling the end of her speaking window. For a beat, the hall remained still. Then the applause began. Different from before. Still measured, still dignified, but no longer merely ceremonial. It moved through the chamber in broader waves, some delegates clapping because protocol required it, some because the speech had done what speeches were meant to do, and some because they had expected something weaker and now had to hide that disappointment under their hands. From the inner crescent, Havren offered exactly 3 deliberate claps and no expression. Vall applauded with the cool politeness of a man already rearranging his next conversation. Evos's hands met in a rhythm a shade too amused to be reverent. Lysa Wren's approval looked genuine enough to be dangerous. Pell clapped once, paused, then continued as though resenting the impulse. Director Anne Veren, at the side wall, exhaled. Not visibly to most. To Sweetie, yes. The moderator stepped toward the presentation line to close the segment. The room was easier now. Not safe. Easier. She had done exactly what she intended, eased the first pressure, proved competence, reduced the chance that anyone would dismiss what came next as childish incoherence. That mattered. Because what came next was childish incoherence, but on purpose. Sweetie turned from the microphone, prepared to return to her chair. As she did, the system at the edge of her vision stirred. A small soundless prompt unfolded in crisp white text only she could see. Public emotional response detected. Respect plus curiosity plus tension registered. Emotion points awarded, 12. She kept walking without breaking stride. More text appeared beneath it. Emotion point functions unlocked, basic tier. Minor document seeding. Fragmentary record insertion. Localized paper trail fabrication. Low-depth digital residue. Sweetie's pulse brightened. Not outwardly. Internally, like a current finding metal. 12 was not much. But it was enough. The moderator was already speaking, voice carrying over the fading applause. The chamber acknowledges Representative Sweetie for her address and recognizes. Sweetie slowed by the slightest amount. In that instant between one phrase and the next, while every camera assumed her role in the sequence was finished, she made her first purchase. The action did not require movement. Only intent. A pale interface opened across the lower edge of her vision, elegant and brutally practical. Minor document seeding, 4 EP. Fragmentary record insertion, 5 EP. Localized paper trail fabrication, 8 EP. Low-depth digital residue, 10 EP. She chose quickly. Minor document seeding. Low-depth digital residue. The cost hit at once. Emotion points remaining, -2. Then corrected. Insufficient balance. Of course. She suppressed the urge to laugh. Greedy already. Embarrassing. The chamber was still applauding in pockets. The moderator was transitioning to the next item. Sweetie kept her pace smooth, eyes forward, and waited one more heartbeat while the public response curve continued climbing from the afterglow of her speech. The system chimed silently again. Additional emotion points awarded, 3. Current total, 15. There. She purchased both. The confirmation slid into place with unnerving calm. Minor document seeding deployed. Low-depth digital residue deployed. For one brief second, Sweetie could feel it happen, not physically, but informationally, like a current passing through hidden wires across the world. Obscure storage archives acquired a mislabeled scan file in an old regional defense annex. A private collector's forum in another hemisphere gained a blurry photograph of a red-toned liquid surface attached to a thread no one important would read yet. A dead internal link in a defunct emergency management database now resolved to a title fragment, Incident Review, 354, Restricted Access. A paper record appeared in the basement archive of a minor administrative office, the kind of old printed incident routing form no one had looked at in years because no one liked basement archives until panic made them relevant. Thin traces. Nothing convincing. Nothing that would survive serious scrutiny alone. But that was not the point. The point was sediment. Context. Enough for later proof to land on something other than empty air. Sweetie reached the steps to the inner crescent just as the moderator moved nearer to relieve her station fully. The chamber was relaxing around her. Exactly as planned. She could almost feel Director Anverin beginning to believe the danger had passed. Then the moderator extended a hand toward the microphone stand and said, "The chamber will now proceed to." Sweetie stopped. A tiny thing. One halted step. But because the chamber was full of people trained to notice hesitation, it rang louder than a shout. She turned her head. "Actually," she said. The single word cut through the hall before the moderator could take the microphone offline. Conversation did not resume. It vanished. The moderator froze with one hand half raised. From the side wall, Director Anverin went utterly still. In the inner crescent, Vol's eyes narrowed. Halfren did not move at all. Evos's attention sharpened so fast it was almost visible. Somewhere in the delegate tiers, a data stylus slipped from someone's fingers and tapped once against the floor. Sweetie turned back toward the microphone. Not hurried. Not apologetic. She stepped once more into the speaking line and laid two fingers lightly on the stand as if reclaiming a thought rather than violating procedure in front of the planet. The moderator found their voice. "Representative. There is something else the world should know," Sweetie said. And this time, when she looked out over the hall, the room no longer felt like a chamber. It felt like dry ground waiting for a match. No one moved. The moderator's hand remained suspended beside the microphone stand in a posture halfway between procedure and alarm. The white status ring at the base of the speaking line had already dimmed for transition, then brightened again when Sweetie stepped back into place. Camera drones that had begun drifting toward their next angles snapped their attention inward with small, precise corrections. Across the delegate tiers, people who had just allowed themselves the relief of a completed introduction were forced back into focus. Director Anverin did not visibly react. That was the impressive part. Most people would have shown it somewhere, in the shoulders, the jaw, the eyes. She did none of those things. She simply became very still near the chamber wall, which in her case was more expressive than shouting. Sweetie placed one hand lightly against the microphone's stem and looked out into the silence she had created. The system text appeared at the edge of her vision in clean white lines. Public disruption spike detected. Curiosity intensified. Authority tension increased. Emotion points awarded, 6. Current total, 6. Good. Not much, but enough to start making the lie heavier. The moderator recovered first, as professionals in expensive rooms usually did. "Representative Sweetie," they said, voice carefully neutral, "the chamber can schedule supplemental remarks under review if." "This will be faster," Sweetie said. It was a terrible response in terms of etiquette. It was an excellent one in terms of control. A low ripple moved through the hall, not conversation yet, just the collective strain of people resisting it. The line between offense and intrigue had become very thin. Sweetie continued before anyone could decide which side of it to stand on. "When I accepted this office a few moments ago," she said, "I spoke about truth over comfort." Her tone had changed. Not wildly. Subtly. The warmth she had allowed into the prepared speech was mostly gone now. What remained was flatter, cleaner, more exact. Not cold enough to sound theatrical. Clinical enough to sound intentional. There is information relevant to planetary defense that has not been part of public discourse for reasons that were, until recently, operationally defensible. That did it. The room's silence altered shape. No longer surprise alone. Now attention carried weight. Some delegates leaned forward despite themselves. In the inner crescent, Minister Vol's fingers folded together so precisely it looked painful. Halfren's gaze sharpened. Marshal Evos had stopped pretending this was entertainment. Even Pell had shifted fully away from his display. And in the live audience beyond the walls, millions of viewers had just heard the newly appointed major representative imply classified defense knowledge in her first unscheduled minute on stage. Excellent. The system prompt stirred again. Emotion points awarded, 4. Current total, 10. Basic information shaping available. Sweetie held the room for one more beat and then said, "There exists an organization whose mandate has never aligned with public recognition." Now the whispers started. Tiny. Immediate. Mostly in the delegate galleries, where people were less visible and therefore more human. The hall's acoustic balancing kept most of it from spreading, but not enough to erase the texture. It sounded like static trying to become language. The moderator turned very slightly toward the side wall, likely receiving frantic direction through a hidden channel. Sweetie did not look at them. Instead, with the chamber's attention fixed on her, she used the system. The purchase interface opened across the lower edge of her vision. Minor document seeding, 4 EP fragmentary record insertion, 5 EP localized paper trail fabrication, 8 EP low-depth digital residue, 10 EP 10. Enough for precision if she did not get greedy. She selected quickly. Minor document seeding. Fragmentary record insertion. The white text answered at once. Emotion points spent, 9. Current total, 1. Minor document seeding deployed. Fragmentary record insertion deployed. For a brief instant the world seemed to deepen around the edges. Not physically. Historically. A neglected archive drawer in a defense-adjacent records facility now contained a requisition copy stamped with a seal no current department officially used, referencing a containment transfer authorized decades earlier under an acronym no one in that office would immediately recognize. A retired analyst's private backup drive, untouched for years, now held an incomplete image folder labeled Site Correspondence, Foundation Liaison, Restricted. 3 disconnected public sector indexing systems acquired faint metadata ghosts tied to expired permissions and dead file paths. Searchable only if someone already suspected what to search for. A hospital records conversion log from 14 years ago now included a corrupted intake note referencing amnestic review pending. Small things. Fragile things. Exactly the kind of things real conspiracies left behind because no one had the budget or patience to scrub history perfectly. Sweetie almost admired the system for its sense of texture. The whispering in the hall thinned as people realized she was about to continue. She did. The organization is known internally as the SCP Foundation. This time there was no ripple. There was impact. A visible jolt passed through the room, not because anyone believed her, not yet, but because the name had the shape of specificity. It did not sound like improvised fear or abstract warning. It sounded like the kind of label bureaucracies generated when they intended a thing to survive paperwork. The moderator's composure cracked by a millimeter. In the inner crescent, Lysa Wren's brow pulled tight. Vol's expression became beautifully blank, which meant he disliked surprises on a nearly spiritual level. Pell watched Sweetie with the stillness of a man abruptly moving several lines of internal calculation onto a new board. Havren remained the hardest to read. Only her eyes had changed, narrowing just enough to indicate that whether this was madness or intelligence failure, she intended to know which before anyone else. Marshal Evos spoke first, because of course he did. "Representative," he said, voice carrying cleanly across the chamber, "if you are about to invent a secret army in your first session, at least make it a memorable one." A few strained laughs broke in the outer tiers. Sweetie turned her head and looked at him, not offended, not indulgent. "It isn't an army." Then she looked forward again. "It is a containment authority." That killed the laughter before it had properly formed. Sweetie continued in the same exact tone, the one that sounded least like performance and therefore made people work harder to dismiss it. The SCP Foundation's purpose is simple in mandate and complex in execution. It identifies, contains, studies, and where possible secures anomalous entities, locations, phenomena, and objects whose existence cannot be reconciled with baseline consensus reality without unacceptable destabilization. The room stared at her. She could feel it in layers now, every sentence forcing more people into one of 2 camps, immediate rejection or unwilling engagement. There was very little middle left, and that was ideal. Indifference would have been useless. The organization operated globally, she said. It did so without public recognition because public recognition was not compatible with its function. Most anomalies were never suitable for public exposure. Some were dangerous on contact. Some were dangerous through awareness. Some required containment procedures that could not survive political theater or civilian fascination. There. Enough structure to sound like doctrine. Enough detail to sound expensive. Enough restraint to make the falsehood feel older than the room. From the side wall, one of the chamber staff had gone pale and was whispering into a throat mic while trying not to seem as though they were whispering into a throat mic. Screens in the delegate rows were lightly lighting up with private searches already. Good. Let them search. They would begin finding crumbs now. The system rewarded her. Public cognitive friction detected. Disbelief plus intrigue plus pattern search behavior increasing. Emotion points awarded, 5. Current total, 6. Not enough for the heavier fabrication yet. Soon. Sweetie folded one hand loosely over the other at her waist and went on. Until very recently, that arrangement remained intact. The hall had become so quiet that the faint hum of the camera drone sounded louder than it should have. A disruption event occurred. Not too much detail. Details invited the wrong questions at the wrong time. She needed enough to imply classified knowledge, not enough to force explanatory precision she could not yet support. The exact mechanics of that event remain under internal review. Its outcome does not. Anomalous entities and objects previously secured by the Foundation were displaced from this plane of accessible containment. A delegate in the lower right gallery actually made a noise of disbelief, soft but very real. Sweetie did not acknowledge it. They are no longer in custody, she said. They are no longer absent in any final sense. And over time, they will return. That line hit differently. Even the skeptics felt it, because a lie about a secret organization was one thing. A lie about a secret organization losing control of impossible objects was much more inconveniently shaped. It implied consequences. Consequences demanded follow-up. Follow-up forced attention. Minister Vall leaned forward at last. On whose authority, he said, his polished voice carrying effortlessly, is this statement being delivered? There it was. Not do you expect us to believe this? Not what proof do you have? Authority first. Very on-brand. Sweetie turned toward him just enough to answer without seeming challenged. On the authority of the office currently speaking, she said, and on behalf of a body that does not traditionally request permission before performing necessary work. That was not the safe answer. It was, however, the answer most likely to keep the Foundation-shaped silhouette intact. Vall's jaw tightened almost invisibly. That is not how intergovernmental legitimacy functions. No, Sweetie said. It's how containment functions. The hall gave her another low electric ripple of reaction. A dangerous one this time, interest beginning to override propriety. Havren spoke before Vall could push again. Representative Sweetie. Her voice did not rise. It simply arrived at every point in the chamber with the clean authority of long practice. If this organization exists, and if what you are claiming is more than staged rhetoric, then either elements within our defense structure knew of it, or they did not. Sweetie looked at her. Havren's face was carved from composure, but the question beneath the words was sharp enough to skin wire. Which failure? Havren asked. Are you alleging? Beautiful. Sweetie could have kissed her for that question if the room had been much stranger and she had been much less herself. It did exactly what she needed. It made the Foundation relevant to existing structures of accountability. It forced the chamber to imagine the possibility as administrative failure rather than fantasy alone. Sweetie answered without pause. Compartmentalization, she said. Not ignorance. That was another carefully chosen lie. Ignorance sounded implausible. Compartmentalization sounded expensive, arrogant, and entirely believable. The Foundation interacted with state authorities when and where anomalous containment intersected national jurisdiction, she continued. Not all contacts retained full records. Not all partner offices preserved context beyond their operational window. That was considered acceptable under prior containment stability. While she spoke, the system text slid in again. Emotion points awarded, 3. Current total, 9. Localized paper trail fabrication available. There. Sweetie spent it immediately. Localized paper trail fabrication. Emotion points spent, 8. Current total, 1. Localized paper trail fabrication deployed. Again the world acquired weight. In a sealed records room 3 floors below the very hall she stood in, a transit case now included a paper memorandum stamped 18 years out of date, referencing Foundation liaison non-disclosure continuation under Emergency Anomaly Protocol. Its signatures were partly illegible. Its routing marks were perfect. In the private office of a retired minister who had spent the last decade telling anyone who would listen that half the classified state was held together by old lies, a locked drawer now contained a duplicate contact slip with an unfamiliar emblem and a phone number that no longer connected. In a provincial archive center on another continent, a shelf inventory mismatch corrected itself by adding one thin incident folder under a misfiled emergency designation. Enough. Enough that when people started pulling threads, some would come away with lint. Sweetie returned her full attention to the chamber. The Foundation's absence from public language, she said, should not be mistaken for absence from history. No one laughed this time. No one even tried. The chamber had moved past ridicule and into the more dangerous phase where people began wondering whether disbelief was going to embarrass them later. That was exactly where she wanted them. She let her gaze sweep the hall once more, taking in the delegates, the rising tension, the camera drones hanging like polished insects under the orbital light ceiling. Then she spoke the next line with the same even clarity she had used for everything else. I am not raising this now to ask for trust. A pause. I am raising it because the return of anomalous phenomena is not hypothetical. Now the room really did feel different. Not convinced. Not close. But primed. Dry ground, as she had thought before. Dry enough that all it needed now was the first real shape of fire. Sweetie's fingers rested lightly against the microphone stand. Her red eyes moved over the hall, bright and steady under the white chamber lights, and when she spoke again her voice grew just a shade more exact. There is a specific case the world should know first. The chamber held its breath. Sweetie did not give them the case. Not yet. She let the silence stretch just long enough for impatience to begin forming in the room. On the delegate levels, screens glowed against faces gone careful and alert. In the inner crescent, no one bothered pretending this was a harmless deviation anymore. Even the moderator had stopped trying to reclaim procedure. Somewhere above, in the dark observation bands, someone important was almost certainly issuing instructions into a private channel. That was fine. Orders took time, public moments moved faster. Sweetie's gaze slid once across the hall and came back to center. Before I name it, she said, you need to understand the structure that produced it. That sounded like a courtesy. It was, in fact, a trap. People were much more likely to remember the next thing she said if they had first been forced to stand still and build a place for it in their heads. The SCP Foundation, she continued, was not created in response to the Aki. That line landed cleanly and hard. Good. Half the room had probably assumed, in the first shocked seconds after she named the organization, that she was about to unveil some buried wartime auxiliary, a shadow defense branch, a classified containment bureau spun out of invasion panic and then preserved by inertia. Making the Foundation older in concept, separate in mandate, and merely parallel to public defense made it stranger. Stranger was better. It predates current defense frameworks in function, Sweetie said. Not necessarily in institutional continuity. Names shift. Structures adapt. Authorities fracture and reassemble. The mandate remained. She let her voice flatten slightly with the last word. Secure. Contain. Protect. There. 3 words. Simple enough to survive the room. Sharp enough to stick. She could almost feel them landing in minds across the network, not believed, not accepted, but retained. A slogan gave lies bones. The purpose of the Foundation was never conquest, deterrence, or territorial defense, she said. Its function was narrower and more absolute. When an anomaly appeared, it was identified. When possible, it was contained. When necessary, populations were managed, evidence was controlled, and reality was permitted to continue looking ordinary. A murmur escaped somewhere in the upper seats. A harsh little exhale of disbelief, immediately swallowed. Sweetie ignored it. Most of you have lived in a world where ordinary reality appears stable, she said. That appearance was not accidental. That sharpened the skepticism in the room into something more useful, not agreement. Resistance with traction. People bristled when told their normal life might have been maintained by hidden custodians. They also remembered those words better than safer ones. Marshal Evos leaned forward with both forearms on his knees, no longer bothering to look relaxed. You are asking this chamber, he said, to accept that a secret containment authority operated across sovereign jurisdictions for generations and no one with a functioning ego tried to make it public. Sweetie turned toward him. I'm not asking the chamber to accept anything, she said. I'm telling it what was easier to deny before the containment failure. A few heads moved at that. Tiny shifts. Not approval. Recognition of the tactic. She was not pleading. She was not trying to win them with sincerity. She was placing a shape in the room and leaving everyone else to bruise themselves against it. Evos's eyes narrowed, interested despite himself. Very convenient phrasing. Yes, Sweetie said. Reality often is. That brought a brief, dangerous stillness across the lower tiers. Not because the line was dramatic. Because she had delivered it without ornament, as if she were tired of explaining basic conditions to people who preferred their problems visible. Minister Vall broke in before Evos could answer. Representative, you keep substituting composure for evidence. His voice remained polished, but the polish had thinned. He disliked the room being moved by something he had not approved. Sweetie looked at him. No. I'm substituting sequence for impatience. Across the inner arc, Representative Pell let out the faintest breath through his nose. It was not quite laughter. Close enough to be rude. Vall did not glance at him. Then perhaps you could honor the chamber with a sequence leading to proof. Perhaps, Sweetie said. She turned back to the room before the answer could settle into victory for him. The Foundation was structured for compartmentalization because many anomalies worsen with careless exposure. Some become harder to contain when widely described. Some produce fixation. Some distort memory. Some invite imitation. Some are not dangerous in themselves until the human response around them turns them into a mass event. That line pulled at a different section of the audience. Not the hard skeptics. The administrators. The policy minds. The people who knew enough about information contagion, civil panic, mimetic failures, and social amplification to find the statement annoyingly plausible even while rejecting its premise. Good. Always give bureaucrats a reason to dislike how much sense a lie makes. The public-facing world rarely saw the Foundation directly, Sweetie said. When it did, it usually did not remember correctly. Several delegate screens lit at once. Search activity, cross-reference requests, emergency contact queries. She could not see the content, but she could see the pattern of motion. People were already reaching outward through their systems looking for matching terms, old anomalies in the wrong place, orphaned files, unexplained incident closures. The seeded fragments would be waiting for some of them now, thin as dust and nearly as unsatisfying. The system rewarded her again. Public pattern recognition increasing. Emotional agitation elevated. Emotion points awarded, 7. Current total, 8. Useful. She kept speaking while she spent them. A pale internal menu unfolded and she selected without hesitation. Minor document seeding. Emotion points spent, 4. Current total, 4. Minor document seeding deployed. Another set of tiny supports slid into reality. An outdated emergency training packet in a provincial response archive now included one page too many, stamped with a barely legible emblem and a line about civilian exposure mitigation following anomalous breach conditions. A logistics warehouse audit on another continent acquired a phantom discrepancy tied to sealed biohazard transport containers that had never officially existed. A dead subdomain in a neglected state network now briefly indexed the phrase Foundation Custodial Review, then vanished behind a permissions error. Nothing impressive alone. Exactly enough to annoy serious people. Lysa Wren spoke for the first time since Sweetie began this second address. Her voice was clear and lower than Sweetie expected, touched by an exhaustion that sounded old rather than personal. "If what you're describing is true," she said, "then why tell the public now?" That was a better question than most of the room deserved. Sweetie turned toward her. Wren's hands were still folded in her lap, but the grip had tightened just enough to show in the tendons. She was not chasing contradiction for sport. She was already thinking of citizens, trust collapse, media storms, the panic cost of introducing a hidden anomalous authority into society's balanced on everyday routine. Sweetie answered her honestly by the standards of lies. "Because the previous arrangement depended on completed containment," she said. "That arrangement is gone." Wren held her gaze. Sweetie continued. "If anomalous events begin recurring without a framework attached to them, the public will do what publics do: fragment, mythologize, commercialize, deny, exaggerate, turn isolated incidents into entertainment until the body count becomes inconvenient." That line moved through the hall like a blade drawn slowly from cloth. "The Foundation's name needs to exist before its work becomes visible," Sweetie said. "Not because visibility is desirable. Because unmanaged discovery is worse." Havren finally spoke again. "And you are choosing to establish that name yourself." Not a question. Sweetie looked at her. Someone had to say it first. Havren's eyes stayed on her for one long beat. "That is not the same as being the correct person to do so." "No," Sweetie said. "But the correct time matters more." The older woman's expression did not change. Something in it hardened very slightly, not into hostility, but into a different species of respect, the kind reserved for dangerous decisions that at least understand themselves. At the chamber wall, Director Anne Veron had gone beyond stillness into a state approaching architectural support. Sweetie almost felt bad for her. Almost. "The Foundation's secrecy was functional," Sweetie said, returning her attention to the hall. "Its absence from public language was not a moral virtue. It was a containment tool. But conditions have changed. Information now has to do part of the work infrastructure once handled in silence." That was important. Not because anyone would understand the real mechanism behind the words, but because it helped justify why a hidden authority might begin surfacing only now. Systems adapted. Secret institutions revised doctrine. Governments did this constantly. Making the Foundation sound like one more rigid machine forced to modernize under threat made it easier to imagine. She shifted her hand on the microphone stem, a tiny movement that kept her body from going too still under the lights. "There are already remnants," she said. "Contact traces. Dead file routes. Incident references stripped of context. Agreements signed by people who understood one narrow portion of the work and never saw the whole. Some of those records survive. Most of them are useless alone. That was intentional. And now, somewhere in the world, a handful of those records were becoming just real enough to be discovered by exactly the sort of people who hated coincidence." Vol leaned back in his seat, which meant he had stopped trying to challenge the room openly and started calculating privately instead. More dangerous. Better. Pell had one hand against his chin now, not because he doubted less, but because he doubted in more expensive directions. Marshal Evos looked almost annoyed at the amount of his own attention he had been forced to invest. "You keep speaking as though this is all already in motion." Sweetie met his eyes. "It is." No emphasis. None needed. Evos held her gaze for a second, then looked away first, not conceding, simply deciding he disliked the answer enough to store it. The moderator finally found an opening wide enough to step into. "Representative Sweetie, The chamber will require formal substantiation before any institutional acknowledgement of this alleged organization can proceed. Sweetie nodded as if that were the most ordinary sentence in the world. Of course. That answer seemed to throw them more than argument would have. She continued before the moderator could misread the nod as surrender. I am not asking for institutional acknowledgement today. I'm establishing initial public and intergovernmental awareness because the first return event must not occur in a complete vacuum of language. There was that word again. Return. Not theory. Not possibility. Return. Every time she used it, more people sat a little differently. The chamber had become taut. The polished floor, the cold white lights, the drone cameras, the banners hanging high above the inner crescent, it all felt stretched around a single invisible point, waiting for her to drive the next pin through it. She let the room feel that. Then she gave them one more piece. The displacement event that removed Foundation-secured anomalies from accessible containment did not destroy them, she said. It interrupted custody. What was secured elsewhere will re-enter conditions suitable for manifestation here over time. Not too much. Never too much. Enough to imply process, not enough to invite technical follow-up she could not fake yet. Some anomalies will be localized. Some mobile. Some passive until interacted with. Some immediately hostile. That one caught hard. Even the skeptics heard the shape of disaster in it. An immediately hostile anomaly was the kind of phrase no responsible official could comfortably ignore, no matter how badly they wanted to. Sweetie could feel the room right at the edge now. Not belief. Preparation for the possibility of future embarrassment. That was enough. Most important public pivots began there. The system text appeared again. Threshold conditions improving. Concept receptivity increasing. Early believers present. Emotion points awarded, 5. Current total, 9. A tiny fraction, just as expected. The sort of people who would not flood public feeds arguing she was right. People who collected strange details in silence. People who already distrusted the completeness of official reality. People who had seen one wrong thing in their life and never found language for it afterward. Useful people. Quiet people. Sweetie spent none of the points this time. She let them sit. The hall had gone completely still again. No more scattered whispers. No more attempts at humor. Only the low mechanical hush of the building and the soft active whir of the cameras. She looked across the delegates, the inner crescent, the observation tiers, and beyond them into the unseen mass of the network audience hanging on the impossible notion she had just built in front of them, a hidden foundation, a failed displacement event, anomalies waiting to return. Not enough. It still needed shape. Image. A thing the mind could grab and keep. Sweetie's voice grew a shade more exact. The Foundation classifies anomalies individually, she said. Designation is numerical. Documentation is procedural. Public language, where used at all, is descriptive rather than interpretive. That caught people oddly. Structure reassured them even while it made the content worse. The first case I am naming is neither the most complex nor the most dangerous anomaly ever held, she said. It is simply among the most likely to become visible when return conditions stabilize. She let one beat pass. Because when it appears, she said, it is very difficult to hide. There. Now even the people who had spent the last several minutes silently mocking this in their heads were leaning in despite themselves. Sweetie's fingers rested still against the microphone. Her pale hair lay over the black line of her coat. The bow at the back of her head did not move. Her red eyes shone under the chamber lights, steady and unhurried, as if she were not about to place the first real anomaly into the mouth of the world. When it returns, she said, it will not announce itself politely. Sweetie let the sentence settle. No one in the hall interrupted her now. The room had gone past the point where people still believed procedure could save them from the moment. The moderator stood half a step back from the speaking line with the controlled helplessness of someone whose training covered wars, scandals, assassination scares, cyber intrusion, and mass protests, but had somehow never included newly appointed major representative reveals hidden anomalous containment authority on live global broadcast. The air in the chamber felt thinner than before. Sweetie could feel it in the delegates, in the fixed way they held themselves, in the faint blue-white reflections of active private screens lighting the undersides of hands and sleeves. Camera drones hung suspended in patterns so still they looked pinned to the light. The banners overhead did not move. The great pale arcs of the ceiling lighting converged above her like something orbital and judgmental. Good. Now the world would remember. She spoke again, voice precise. The Foundation designation is SCP-354. There was no reaction in the hall at first. Just the number. 3 digits and a prefix, dropped into the room without emphasis. For most of the audience it meant nothing. Which was exactly why it worked. Meaning could come later. Right now she needed shape, not understanding. Sweetie continued. Common reference, the red pool. That did it. Not belief. Imagination. A visible, almost physical shift passed through the chamber as minds moved from abstract conspiracy into involuntary image. Red. Pool. Liquid. Depth. Surface. Blood, almost but not necessarily blood. Too simple not to picture. Too wrong not to keep picturing once it arrived. She gave them no time to recover. SCP-354 is an anomalous body of red liquid resembling water or diluted blood in coloration, she said. Its depth is undetermined. Direct visual estimation has never been considered reliable. Not too much flourish. Just enough cadence to make the structure feel old and repeated. It manifests in wilderness-adjacent environments with sufficient isolation to delay immediate discovery and sufficient proximity to population centers to make delayed discovery irrelevant. That line earned her the first genuine sound from the delegates below, not speech, but a low rustle of movement as people straightened, screens brightened, styluses came up, aides began recording with a kind of frightened professionalism. Sweetie could almost feel the concept taking shape as she described it. Not believed yet. But placed. Installed. An outline being drawn in millions of heads. The surface appears calm under some conditions, she said. This should not be interpreted as safety. SCP-354 is associated with hostile emergent events. Marshal Evos spoke before he could stop himself. Hostile what? Sweetie turned her head only slightly. Entities, she said. No smile. No softness. Just the answer. Then she looked back to the hall. Organisms or quasi-organisms have been observed emerging from SCP-354, she said. These entities vary in form, but their behavioral pattern is consistent enough for initial public warning. They are aggressive, they are not ecologically native, and they should not be approached under any circumstance. That one hit deep. Somewhere in the upper delegate tiers, someone muttered a curse too low for the microphones. One of the camera drones shifted to catch the fated arc, likely at the direction of media teams who understood exactly what kind of reaction shot they wanted attached to these statements. Sweetie kept going. The anomaly itself is not to be mistaken for a contaminated pond, chemical spill, ritual site, or isolated criminal disposal zone, she said. Containment procedures require specialized response. Again, shape. Procedure. Age. Texture. Lisa Wren's face had lost color. Not because she believed. Because she had enough civic instincts to understand what even an invented version of this would do if mishandled in public. Search traffic, copycat reports, fear spikes near rural water sources, local officials demanding guidance, news feeds spinning narratives before facts existed. Minister Vall was no longer trying to hide his anger. Not because he thought Sweetie was right, but because she had chosen a public setting in which disproving her quickly might itself become difficult. Perfect. Sweetie lifted her chin the slightest amount and let the next sentences come out in a flatter, more report-like cadence. Historical containment assumptions treated SCP-354 as a stationary location-based anomaly capable of producing intermittent breach-level biological threats. Civilian discovery scenarios were considered high risk due to the tendency of secondary responders to misidentify the source and engage emergent entities without proper site suppression. There. Now the governments watching had something worse than a scary image. They had an implied operational failure model. Monsters show up first. Source gets missed. Response wastes time on symptoms. That was exactly what she needed seeded. Havren's voice cut in. If this is a warning, she said, then give the chamber one that can be acted on. Sweetie looked at her. Of all the people in the room, Havren was the least interested in winning the argument and the most interested in whether any part of it needed planning around, which made her dangerous in the useful direction. Sweetie answered immediately. When SCP-354 returns, the first visible sign may not be the pool, she said. It may be the appearance of hostile entities in or near inhabited zones adjacent to wilderness. Witness accounts linking those events to an inland red body of liquid should not be discarded as panic contamination before reconnaissance. That one landed even harder than the number had. Now there was a practical image attached to the concept: remote edge of a village, modern infrastructure, emergency calls, bodies, things coming out of the tree line, someone babbling about red water deeper in the woods and being ignored because obviously that's not the relevant part. A few people in the lower levels had gone very still in the way trained officials did when a scenario suddenly slotted into emergency planning templates whether they wanted it or not. The system text appeared in white at the edge of Sweetie's vision. Concept response detected, public memorability increased. Silent belief nodes forming. Emotion points awarded, 11. Current total, 20. There it was. Not enough for manifestation. Not even close. But enough to tell her the shape had taken. She kept her face unchanged. The Foundation's role in such an event, she said, would be direct site identification, perimeter control, emergent entity suppression, and anomaly containment. Would be. Not is. Important. She was establishing continuity without making claims she couldn't support yet. The difficulty, Sweetie said, is that the Foundation no longer retains all prior assets in accessible readiness. That was deliberate too. It made the story more believable. A flawless hidden organization was fantasy. A broken hidden organization trying to recover under pressure sounded much more like government. We are rebuilding contact, process, and response pathways, she said. Slowly. A beautiful lie. The chamber absorbed it. The moderator's desk below the speaking line now had 3 aides clustered behind it, all pretending not to be part of an active institutional crisis. In the delegate galleries, private lines were almost certainly screaming. Across the world, commentators would already be replaying the phrases red pool and hostile entities while experts, skeptics, and opportunists sharpened themselves in real time. Good. Let the world work. Sweetie laid one final layer over the seed. SCP-354 is not being disclosed because it is convenient, she said. It is being disclosed because it is visible by nature once active conditions are met. If and when it manifests, it will produce consequences large enough that silence becomes less defensible than warning. That sentence pleased her. It sounded like the sort of thing a hidden bureaucracy would write after losing an internal argument. She looked slowly across the hall. At this stage, she said, I am not asking for belief. A pause. I am advising against dismissal. That was the line. The one the quiet minority would cling to. Not because it proved anything. Because it gave them permission to keep the possibility alive without having to sound foolish defending it too early. She could already imagine the shape of it outside this room. Most people scoffing. Jokes. Clips. Reaction feeds. Think pieces about political theater, manipulative symbolism, institutional drift, defense myth-making. And underneath all that noise, a much smaller group doing something more useful. Remembering. Saving the number. Saving the phrase. Red Pool. SCP-354. A hidden foundation. Enough for later. Sweetie let the hall sit in the aftermath of that for one measured beat, then another. No one broke it. Not Vol, though he wanted to. Not Evos, though he looked ready to wrestle the claim into a more military shape. Not Ren, though worry sat openly on her now. Not Havren, who understood the danger of being first to speak after an image had just been planted that effectively. The chamber belonged to Sweetie for those 2 seconds. Then the system moved. A small bright pane unfolded in her vision. Seed criteria satisfied at basic level. SCP-354 concept seed established. Belief concentration currently insufficient for manifestation. Highest density of early receptivity logged. Tracking initialized. A thrill went through her so sharp she almost smiled. Almost. She held it down with practiced ease and stepped back from the microphone. The white ring at its base dimmed. That, more than any official intervention, broke the spell. Sound rushed into the hall all at once, not shouting, not chaos, but the hard-edged roar of controlled institutions losing the luxury of pretending nothing unusual had happened. Delegates leaned toward one another. Private channels came alive. Screens flashed. The moderator tried to reclaim the room and got their first 3 words swallowed whole by the sudden density of response. Sweetie turned from the speaking line. She did not hurry. That mattered. Panic would have cheapened it. So would triumph. She walked back toward the inner crescent with the same even pace she had used when first crossing the floor, pale hair lying smooth against the dark line of her coat, black bow resting at the back of her head like a small private mark of refusal. Now the other fated watched her differently. Vol no longer looked disappointed. He looked offended by the future. Marshal Evos's expression had become far too alert for comfort and far too entertained for safety. Lysa Ren looked as though she wanted 3 private briefings, 2 intelligence audits, and a very long drink. Pell's indifference had died completely. In its place sat the cold attention of a man already tracing supply implications for a threat model he did not believe but could not afford to ignore. And Havren. Havren looked at Sweetie the way one looked at a sealed device that had begun ticking in a language nobody in the room officially recognized. Interesting. Sweetie reached her chair just as the moderator finally forced enough order back into the chamber to speak. The hall, the moderator said, with the brittle dignity of a person trying to nail procedure back over a crack in reality, will enter restricted review protocol. All representatives are advised that unscheduled claims made under live session conditions are now subject to immediate cross-channel verification and emergency procedural consultation. A useless sentence, really. But necessary theater. Sweetie sat. The chair adjusted around her again, quiet and efficient. Its data strip lit at once with incoming notices, request flags, internal challenge markers, cross-government query prompts, and a sharp cluster of restricted pings from people who had spent the last 5 minutes discovering that their professional lives were about to become significantly more annoying. She rested one hand against the arm of the seat and let her gaze move calmly over the chamber as though she had not just placed a world-ending fiction into the bloodstream of planetary governance. The system text glowed once more. Initial seeding successful. Administrator performance rated, effective. Foundation narrative traction, low, but stable. Await future conditions for manifestation. Low, but stable. Exactly as expected. Most would dismiss her. Publicly, loudly, confidently. A tiny fraction would not. They would wait. Watch. Search. Save clips. Save names. Remember the warning when the first monsters came out of the tree line and somebody, somewhere, insisted they had seen red water in the wild. Then the world would do what it always did when proof finally arrived. Rush toward it all at once and claim it had almost known from the beginning. Sweetie looked straight ahead, composed beneath the lights while the hall struggled to reorganize itself around what she had done. Inside, excitement moved through her, bright and dangerous and impossible to mistake. The Foundation did not exist. Not yet. But now the world had heard its name.